Mayor John Tory handled the politics behind the new public transit plan for Scarborough. But what about the nuts and bolts of recrafting the plan itself? How did the planners come up with a new compromise solution that so far seems to be meeting with almost everyone's endorsement? Let's find out. Here's Toronto's chief planner, Jennifer Keesmaat. Good to have you back here at TVO.
It's good to be here.
The original Scarborough subway plan was supposedly carved in stone, and I'm trying to figure out how it got uncarved. So where did the idea originate to reopen this whole idea?
Well, I would never call it a reopening, and I would also say it wasn't carved in stone because we were in the midst of a public process that had been unfolding over 12 months to look at corridor alignments. So we were directed by City Council to look at corridor alignments in one council meeting when it was approved. Subsequently, almost a year later, we were directed to look at Smart Track and to look at the viability of implementing Smart Track in Scarborough. So essentially, we were in a situation in city planning where we had these two proposals that are adjacent to each other, that have an impact on each other, that really put us in a position where we felt really an obligation to ask the question, what does good transit planning look like in Scarborough, in this area of the city?
So from a planning standpoint, you're thinking this doesn't make any sense, and therefore you do what?
Therefore, well, I directed my staff to ask that question. What does good transit planning look like in Scarborough? I actually suggested to them that I wanted to do something that we never really do, which is to just put all the politics to the side, put the previous decisions to the side.
What? Sorry? What? Put all the politics to the side? That's how the thing got approved in the first place.
Well, it's a very tricky thing as a bureaucrat because you have direction from City Council, and at the same time, you have an obligation to make recommendations that are in the public interest. And those two things bump up against each other sometimes.
No kidding, every day. Did anybody from the political side of this debate ever come to you during the course of your looking at it and say, Jennifer, leave this alone. We got the feds in, we got the province in, the City Council has passed this. It's going to be a political headache if you reopen this. Leave it alone.
Well, no, because we didn't actually come forward with the idea until it was fully cooked, quite frankly. Like, we'd thought it through, we'd undertaken our analysis, so it emerged out of the analysis. But we knew that there was quite a bit of concern that was being voiced publicly, it was being blogged about, it was being written about this challenge that we faced with respect to these needing to put all the puzzle pieces together in Scarborough in a way that is, in fact, good planning. So we were fully aware of this broader dialogue, and we were busy really behind the scenes doing our due diligence and analysis with the intent of bringing forward a recommendation that we felt would be in the public interest. And
when you brought forward that recommendation, who did you take it to?
We took it to the mayor's office.
And what was the reaction?
And the mayor's office was a very positive reaction, and in part because when we brought it to the mayor's office, you know, in some ways we sort of thought, let's see if this is really how things are going to unfold here. So we brought it in a package that was based in an analysis. So we brought analysis of travel patterns. How are people currently moving in Scarborough? We brought a land use analysis. We looked at the larger policy objectives and what we're seeking to achieve in Scarborough with respect to transit. So we really built up a rationale that identified two critical priorities, one being connecting the regional center, and the second being responding to where people are currently moving in the city. And as a result of that analysis, I think the logic that we presented was laid pretty bare.
The logic may have been laid bare, but you know this thing only got approved in the first place as a grand political compromise because of imperatives of a Scarborough by-election for the province, and then the city had its political issues as well. So again, I'm going to go at this again. Did nobody in the mayor's office say to you or to the mayor himself, this is going to open up a can of worms that you just don't want to get into?
Well, of course that was said, and I resist the word reopening because I was fully aware that whole time that we actually need to bring an alignment back to City Council, and the minute we bring that alignment back to City Council, it's all fair game. Everything is fair game. Everything was on the table. So there was a little bit of a myth that this decision was made and now we're moving on, when in reality, and there still are today, many decision points ahead of us. As there always are on any project, the challenge on this one is that there were many decision points and it remained very contentious, meaning that it could flip or flop either way moving forward.
Now, when you and your staff sit down to consider how to improve on a previous plan, Do you take the political realities of the day into account?
Well, sure, we would be silly people if we didn't. We also...
In other words, it's not just planning principles that you're putting forward here.
Well, part of our evaluation framework for transit planning includes an analytic piece called strategic fit, and also constructability, and also feasibility. So after we've gone through our higher level principles around supporting neighborhood improvement areas and supporting employment lands and creating healthy neighborhoods, once a project has been through those filters, we then have to ask the questions around strategic fit, constructability, and feasibility
Which sound
funding.
like long words for politics. Is that what that means?
No, not really,
No?
because strategic fit is this something, for example, if strategic fit didn't matter or constructability didn't matter, sure, recommend subways across the entire city.
Okay.
If funding didn't matter, sure, recommend subways absolutely everywhere. But funding does matter. Why would we do work that is completely useless because it isn't strategically a priority for the city, or because it's not constructible, or because you could never, ever get it funded? So those are true planning considerations. They're considerations that we bring to the fore in every planning process.
Okay. So what's the new price tag now?
Well, the price tag right now, order of magnitude, is in the same range. We brought this before Executive Committee because we wanted some direction to go off and do further consultation and further due diligence. So as a result of the unanimous decision at Executive, we are now moving forward and doing further analysis. And that includes working with the TTC and, of course, with Metrolinx.
So we're sort of between $3.5 to $4 billion, somewhere in that ballpark?
So the original funding envelope that was approved by City Council was $3.56 billion. So we essentially asked the question, what would an optimized transit plan in Scarborough look like within that order of magnitude funding envelope? And that's what we presented to Executive Committee.
And why is this better?
Well, this is better for so many reasons. One of the biggest reasons is that it responds directly to two key priorities in our policy framework. We recognize that we want the Scarborough Town Centre, and it's not this today, but we want it to become an urban core, an urban hub, a place where there's a tremendous amount of density that really acts as the heart of the entire district of Scarborough.
And this will help do that.
Well, this is one of the critical pieces. There's other critical pieces as well. We need to redesign the road network, and we're beginning that work immediately. We need built form frameworks that will direct and shape the growth.
Sorry, what's that?
Built form frameworks. So, how tall should the buildings be? How should they line the streets? How do we create an urban character? None of that exists today. And it's important to note, people say, oh, it's never going to happen in Scarborough. Well, the condo boom you see in downtown Toronto today, that's 40 years of planning policy. That planning policy came into place 40 years ago, and we're now seeing it hit a tipping point and a critical mass in the downtown core. Well, Scarborough deserves that opportunity too, and we recognize provincially, we recognize at the city level, we recognize at the regional level that it's a good thing to be a multi-hubbed city. And this is about one of the critical ingredients to create that hub in Scarborough.
Gotcha. Did you see Royce and James's column in the Toronto Star on the past weekend? Of course you did. You read the papers.
I read the papers.
Here's what he had to say. Keesmaat deserves praise. At least she offered some resistance to the runaway train that was this transit plan for Scarborough. But with a little more prompting, a bit of a push, and the tiniest of desire for the best plan at the best price, we might do so much better. Now that we have opened up the Scarborough Transit Plan that Tory fretted about amending, consider all the options, please. Is he right?
Well, he is right in some ways in that we are now going through a continued optimization. So looking at a whole variety of considerations. We got support for a general direction from Executive. I think the LRT has a lot of clarity in terms of how that will proceed, but we'll be looking at the subway component and identifying the best way for it to proceed. My gut reaction, will it likely be underground? Yes, because we want it to be a high-speed connection, and it's a long distance. And there's not a lot between Kennedy and the Scarborough Town Centre. So we want to travel that area very quickly. The objective is to connect the Scarborough Town Centre into the core. But will we look at ways to optimize that? Absolutely. That's what you do as you go into further levels of detail in a planning process.
Now, you did allude to that a little while ago, where you said there will be several more steps along the way that council will have to offer its approval or not, or reconsider or whatever. So this is not a done deal yet. Is that what you're saying?
Well, absolutely not, because we are going to be bringing back in March our due diligence in a report to City Council. Then in June, we'll have a series of decision points. And we're linking those decision points together. So there'll be a recommendation around the smart track service concept. There'll be a recommendation around the optimized infrastructure in Scarborough, so meaning both the express subway as well as the LRT. We'll also be bringing forward a preferred alignment for the relief line. So all of that will be coming together because we are taking a network-based approach, looking at how the network works in an optimized way.
So no pun intended here, but this could still be derailed?
It's totally bad humor, but yes.
I didn't mean it that way.
Hear it all the time.
Yeah.
But the reality is a project can be, you've seen this in your lifetime, a project can be derailed as the shovel is going in the ground. This is why it's so important, I believe, to build a strong consensus and strong understanding for why something is in the long-term interest of the city. And I think we're starting to get there around this plan. I think that the logic has been laid out quite plainly, and I think that it's something that a lot of heads are nodding, okay, now I get it. I get why we're doing this. You know, if you don't believe that the Scarborough Town Centre is valuable and ought to become an urban core, then you won't see the value in this plan. But if you do, you'll connect those dots.
Doug Ford, brother of the former mayor, is, I think, the only guy who has come out so far and said, this is a betrayal because what we promised the people of Scarborough was a 3-stop subway, and we're all about subways. If that's where you're coming from, in your view, does this at all betray that vision?
Well, to be honest, I think it's a bit of a strange comment because at the time and when the approval moved forward, the alignment wasn't clear, the number of stops were not clear. There were, some lines drawn on a map, but there was no planning analysis, there was no environmental assessment. It's always been understood. And in fact, we've been through a very public process looking at different station locations, looking at different alignments. All this work is on our website. It hasn't been done behind closed doors. All that work has been underway with various stakeholder groups across the city and in Scarborough over the course of the past 12 months. So, we've been very transparent about the work we're required to do in order to advance this project and this priority.
Does all of the work around this new Scarborough plan, I guess some people are worried that because there's so much Scarborough sucking the oxygen out of the room at the moment, there will be no more bandwidth left in your department or in politics or whatever to deal with this, call it what you will, Yonge Street Relief Line, Downtown Relief Line, whatever you want to call it. Is that possible?
Well, that's one of the reasons why we've been really clear that we're advancing all of the transit priorities consecutively. They're happening in parallel. The reason being that they're all required on different timelines. The relief line is currently being advanced on the timeline that it is in fact required. Is that a concern? I think that's sort of a scarcity mentality. It's the mentality that, I need to get my project, and if I don't get my project, then the whole thing falls to pot. And that's a bit absurd. Transit is about a network that functions, so we have to be planning the network and advancing the entire network. You can't advance just one project at a time. To be honest, that's old thinking. It's the way we've done it historically. It's not the way we're seeking to do it in the future. This is about advancing a whole variety of priorities at the same time, in part because we're so behind. We can't build one project at a time anymore. We need to expedite our transit infrastructure investments.
So it's go big or go home, as they say.
Well, for this city, absolutely. I think, the Board of Trade sees that. I think, it's a widely established that one of the greatest constraints to growth in our city is, in fact, congestion, and that the way to alleviate that congestion is through building out our transit network. We went through 30 years where we built nothing, and it's payback time. We need to be building a lot now. Our generation, we need to do our part. Our forefathers did. There was a bit of a gap there. We need to do our part, or the legacy we leave will be quite compromised.
That's Jennifer Keesmaat, Chief Planner for the City of Toronto. As always, thanks for coming into TVO, helping us out with this.
My pleasure.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.